I think he was the chairperson of the Joint Standing Committee of Defence. Yusuf Surti, who is involved all over the show in the arms deal. This document deals with the Chief of the Navy at the time. They call him SINK, Chief, but it's actually the Chief of the South African Navy, Vice Admiral Robert Claude Simpson Anderson. His predecessors mentioned in this document, Vice Admiral retired Dries or Andries Pitter. I mentioned the company CMC before. He seems to have been the owner or managing director or the controlling mind of CMC. It mentions Rear Admiral Jonathan Edwin Gold Karmerman in a number of respects, particularly as head of the Joint Project Team, now a manager at ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems, and as it says, or so it says, successor of Klaus Joachim Müller since January 2006. A theme that we will come to later in my evidence document. It involves around this point, say, took his appointment with ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems while still a member of the South African Navy. It says there his last payslip from the South African Navy was for September 2006, and that he also negotiated with ADS about an employment agreement after starting employment with ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems. I don't think I need to or even want to address the next people. I don't want to be accused of cherry picking, so anybody is welcome to bring me back to these points if they wish to do so. The last person under South Africans, just before paragraph 2.3 on my page 6. Unfortunately, my own name is mentioned in this document. It's strange that they actually have my original correct name. I see in the transcript, certainly of the first page, and I'd like to put in the record, my correct current name is Richard.
I'm sorry, Dr. Young. Let's go back to that page 5, which you are reading. I think in all fairness, you did mention other people. I'm not quite sure why you're skipping others. I see here on the copy that I have, unless your copy doesn't have that, there's also Nelson Mandela. I see you don't mention him. Am I correct that, there's, this page 5 has got the name of Nelson Mandela?
Yes, it does.
No, it's just that, I was a bit surprised that you mentioned others, you don't mention him, because they're contained in the same document.
As I said, this is a 40-page document. There is nothing at this particular stage, at least, that I want to traverse regarding Mandela, Nelson Mandela himself. I'm not sure quite why he's mentioned in this document in his own name, but we will come to it, that there is a reference to payments being made. I think it's to the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. There's a mention of his last wife. Maybe that's the context. But said, if I could more or less read this entire document into the record and traverse every aspect with my analysis of it. That might take us the rest of the week. As I said, I'm not trying to cherry pick here, but I'm only trying to address the points that I think is relevant for my own evidence. May I continue?
I'm sure we're just listening now. I'm sure we're listening.
Yes, I just actually asked really whether my evidence leader is leading me, whether he's happy that I continue.
You can continue.
Okay. Just to ensure that I'm doing my level best not to cherry pick and leave out my own name. My own name appears just before item 2.3 here. As I was trying to say, this indicates somebody called Richard Moberly Young. That was the name that I was, I think, baptized with. I added on my father's name, Michael, first, so my official name right now is Richard Michael Moberly Young, but I will confirm that, to the best of my knowledge, Richard Moberly Young is the same person as me. I just wanted to also point out that although I gave my name correctly at the beginning of my witness statement, I did notice that the transcript the first day, for some strange reason, refers me to Richard Michael Morgan Young. I think that's also me, but it's incorrect. But nevertheless, it does refer to me, and I didn't want to leave that out. Hopefully, not mentioned in a negative context as far as being involved myself in bribery and corruption, but I won't leave out me where I'm addressed, just in case there are aspersions of convenient cherry picking here. I'm identified as the director, owner of C-Squared I-Squared Systems, which is correct, and it also says the reason why. I mean, yeah, I suppose that I competed with ADS for the Combat Suite Systems contract and lost. Okay, it was more for not the Combat Suite, but certainly some of its subsystems, which is correct. They do mention my name later, but I just want to reiterate that the evidence that they refer to that I gave them, including the organograms, which I share with this commission, it was all a complete one-way street from me to them. I never received anything whatsoever from them other than the invitation to call back Detective Chief Inspector Andreas Bruns and speak to him when he had one of his English-speaking colleagues on the speakerphone.
There are other names that appear at 2.3 referred to as others. Is there any person specifically you want to refer to there?
No, only at the expense of repetition. We'll talk about Anthony Georgiadis, who was the ostensible leader or prime mover of the German Strategic Alliance, and I think the controlling mind of Malar Incorporated, which was the conduit of the $22 million payments. Otherwise, I don't think it's necessary to refer to the others.
Dr. Young, can we have a spelling of this detective? Is it Anders Bruns? Can we have a spelling of the surname?
Sorry, the spelling of a surname. I didn't hear whose surname.
The German investigator you spoke to, Bruns, or something like that.
A-E-S at the end. Bruns is spelled B-R-U-N-S. I'm not sure if there is a diaresis or some kind of inflection on the U, but I notice B-R-U-N-S.
Thank you.
Just the last one from me. Do you have the contact details of this detective?
I certainly do.
Can you give us the contact details?
Right now?
Of course.
Not right now. I'll have to go into my records, and that will certainly take. I certainly can do it after the next break.
Okay, as long as it's sometime today, or even if you give them to us tomorrow, that will be good enough.
Thank you.
On the next page, your page 7 and our page 1082, the document commences with the origins of the investigation. Is it something you want to take us through?
Yes, as I previously said, they talk about the reference to Sven Muller and the company Jet and the payment of a 40 million, I think it's Deutschmark. Okay, they talk about that as the origins of the investigation, and certainly that was there's something like that did happen. I'm not talking about the actual accompanied yet with the payment of money, but certainly the fact that they had a kind of interview with this person, Nicholas Stewart Achterberg, who I believe used to work for Thyssen South Africa. But I don't think that they continued with that, so I don't want it to be thought that that I also am continuing with that. There is probably a small correction that they come to in their own document, whether it's this one or the next, where they actually do say that the origins of their own formal investigation were not so actually much this tip-off from Nicholas Stewart Achterberg, but actually a routine investigation into the tax affairs of Thyssen and its Thyssen's claim for tax deductions involving the payment of useful expenditure. So remember, these are investigation reports, so whether they are correcting themselves, but I think, in my view, that the real origins of the proper investigation report are not so much this Achterberg matter, but actually the German tax matters.
Now, the issue of the useful expenses is picked up in that document, at the middle of that document, with a paragraph that begins with Achterberg's allegation led to tax investigation. Would you take us there?
That's correct, yes. Okay, my highlighted point there starts off with saying the following, in inverted commas, useful expenses had been claimed, and the reason why they use useful expenses is in the old days in Germany and certainly in Europe before the OECD convention is useful expenses was actually a euphemism for covert commissions or bribes, and they were tax deductible in the old days, but that's why they use that term in inverted commas. But they specifically refer to the following four amounts. I've referred to the $22 million paid into South Africa through the Liberian company Malar Incorporated, the $3 million subject of the Chippy Sheikh Christoph Huning's Teutonic Memorandum through the Jersey or Channel Islands, or let's say UK entity Merian Limited. There's a small amount to Ralph Wechen, I'm not quite sure what the relevance of that is, and there's also a claim, a tax claim involving the company FPS, not such a small, not such a huge amount of money, but if it was illicit money, then it's certainly over the threshold of investigative interest, which is 500,000 rand. Right, to put it into context, and they do go through this more, the exact origins, but as they say, a lawyer, an attorney, a specialist, I believe, Dr. Sven Thomas, acting for Citizen Group, wrote in 1999 a expertise report of how these expenses should be treated under tax legislation, and admitted himself that a share of the $10 million out of the contract sum of the $22 million for Malar Incorporated has very likely been paid to South African officials, but denies the offence, I think they mean, of bribery in connections with these payments.
The next page under paragraph 4 deals with consultancy agreements with Malar Incorporated. Now that next page is in our 1083, your page 8.
Yes, maybe it's important to say I introduced the memorandum, the Teutonic Memorandum yesterday, which is clearly something that they refer to in this document, and although I received it before this document, it was the only one that was actually sent to me. But they refer to a lot of documents of equal significance of that, not only similar bribery agreements, or in my own use of the term executive statements, but also evidence backing up, confirming the existence and the meaning of all of those documents, and they refer to many of those. I think this first one, the consultancy agreement with Malar Incorporated, is one of those. and they talk about a first agreement, a consultancy agreement with Malar, signed as far back as the 26th of April 1995. And as I will come to later in my evidence, that is a particularly important time because it is just before the end of Citron, Project Citron, the Corvette contract, not the contract, the tendering around, which I think officially ended a month later. But clearly, as we will get to, the Germans were exceedingly upset about not winning the first round and did all they could to get back, and that all that happened in that March, April, May time frame. So that is a significant date of why that consultancy agreement should have been drawn up as far back then. It's relevant to the 99 Citron contract as it was in that first round. As they say themselves, in late December 94, the German frigate consortium had failed to qualify to enter the next round of the tender process. What is important, and this is not casting aspersions, just to put it in the context, in January 1995, the then Vice President Thabo Mbeki came to visit Germany. After a telephone call with Nelson Mandela, he was quoted to have uttered that we quote, we will put it on the table again, unquote, and requote, that there is still hope for you, you being the Germans, unquote. That's i.e. the GFC. And the important person in this as the intermediary, the interlocutor, is Tony Georgiadis. About this time, I'm quoting from the document, probably first contact with Tony Georgiadis was made. Excuse me. I'll then skip a few lines and go on to why Georgiadis is so important, as well as Hunnings. And it says here, Georgiadis helped Hunnings by advising him how to present the German offer in a more appropriate way to South African decision makers. This led to a first consultancy agreement with Malar Incorporated and Thyssen Rheinstahl Technique, TRT, April 1995, the sum of $22 million. Tony Georgiadis signed this agreement on behalf of Malar Incorporated. The signatories on behalf of TRT were Hunnings and Koopman. Georgiadis and Hunnings met in London to arrange/sign this agreement. On the 17th of May 95, Georgiadis sent a facsimile to Hunnings saying, quote, step one, we've done it, unquote. And again, I'll come to that later. It was such an important time because at this stage we will see that despite Citron round one having had all the steam it needed, it was actually stopped by various mechanisms, including the defence review and the action of somebody we'll come to, Tony Ngeni, and all of this happened in May. We will come to the relevant documents, recording meetings of Koopman with Arms Corps and the Navy in, I think, March 95, and with Hunnings and other Germans in with also the Navy and Arms Corps around about this time. And it is clear that the Citron Corvette project was indeed stopped. And it will be my theory that it was stopped precisely of what I'm ventilating now. That's why I said it's one of the most important aspects of my evidence before us. As it says, carrying on, quoting from the document, it says, about this time, the first tender most probably had been cancelled.
Is there further aspects that you wish to highlight?
Not necessarily on those pages. I'm trying to page forward to to skip it's all important, but I want to go only the most important. I'm now on my page 10.
Your page 10 is our page 1085. It has there a number 5, a discussion on Antony versus Georgiadis. Is that the section?
Yes, at point 5, Antony versus Georgiadis. That's correct, yes. The point I want to address is 4 lines above that. It says, Malar Incorporated is an offshore company registered in Monrovia / Liberia, full stop. Due to Liberia's legislation, Malar Incorporated is not entitled to do any business in Liberia itself. The import of that is that clearly Malar is a special purpose vehicle. A company wouldn't be registered in a country where it couldn't do business unless it was there to give the indication of it being a bona fide registered entity, but unless it had a special purpose. And it's my contention the special purpose was a funnel for funding. It might have been funnel for other funding as well, but in this particular context, from Thyssen through Tony Georgiadis, being the controlling mind of Malar, to South Africa.
Anything else on that page?
Anything else on that page? I'm just going to scroll forward and I'll tell you where I get to. Okay, I'm now on the next page, starting at a paragraph that says Georgiadis' role in the Corvette deal.
That's your page 11 in our 1086.
Correct, yes.
Right, and that paragraph is the, I think, second paragraph.
I think so, yes. Stop me if we're not at the right place. Okay, I'll read. Georgiadis' role in the Corvette deal can be described as the person who made contact to South African officials, politicians and decision makers in higher positions in the government and Navy. He arranged meetings with Thabo Mbeki even after the contract was signed in connection with the acquisition of the so-called fifth ship. He frequently met with Hunings in Germany, South Africa and London. He was involved in dealings with South African officials throughout the tendering process. Links to certain individuals will be dealt with later. I think, and this is not meant to be sarcastic or a joke, but we're now seeing, as we will see in another point involving Thompson and Pierre Monod, the interactions with, as this document says, South African officials, politicians and decision makers in higher positions. And what I'm pretty sure is that neither MODAC nor MD 147 prescribe this kind of acquisition procedure.
Is there any other passage you would like to refer the Commission to on this page?
I think we were page 10 and now I want to go to page 11.
We were on page 11.
I want to go to the last paragraph on page 11.
You can do so then. Is this the paragraph that starts with the words, "We found indications"?
Yes. We found indication, I'm quoting now, we found indications that Georgiadis was recommended by Hunings to Ferristal, members of the German Submarine Consortium, GSC, to support them during the tender process for the submarines for South Africa. Ferristal signed a consultancy agreement with Malar Incorporated, Georgiadis, acting on behalf of Malar over a commission of $19 million. They do elaborate on that on various other payments. And I just want to also point out, as I've said before, the Germans, specifically in this particular case, the German Frigate Consortium, the German Submarine Consortium, do, as they often do, hunt as a wolf pack. They were hunting the contracts as a organization that was actually officially called the German Strategic Alliance. We even see some of a reference to that on some DoD documents. And as I've said before, it's my understanding that the person who was the prime mover in the German Strategic Alliance was none other than Tony Georgiadis, and the import of that is why he's acting for both the German Frigate Consortium, being Thyssen in particular, and its 22 plus 3 plus $million of covert commissions, and now this first reference to the Submarine Consortium and its $19 million. Go on to the next page. The very next page is a continuation of that. As I said, they start coming to the details. They allege here that's 6.6 million euros were paid to Malar Incorporated in 2000-2001 from Ferrostar. These facts were received officially and legally through documents seized during the June 2006 search of TRT. Carry on. The next paragraph starts by saying, further investigations by the tax investigation officers of our team revealed more information which is unofficial and cannot yet be used as evidence as they are protected by tax secret. Next, I want to emphasize that's the point regarding the tax angle here, and certainly in Germany, tax is obviously hallowed ground, more so than corruption, especially corruption in foreign countries. Nevertheless, they carry on after the colon there. Another 6.6 million euros were paid at the same time to a company called Kelco Associates, South Africa, I think. No, sorry, not South Africa. I think Kelco Associates means Society Anonymous. It's the same as a proprietary limited company in this country, resident on Guernsey, a Channel Island domicile, with an address there that I won't go through, with a CEO of Kelco having been named by Ferrostar as Tony Ellingford. Unfortunately, I won't be addressing the submarine issue in as much detail as the Corvette one, but certainly the relevant parties of Tony Ellingford and his company, as well as the offshoots of that, being a company called Moist CC, run by Lou Swan, and the other company run by somebody I mentioned right at the very beginning for very good reason, JRM Consulting CC, run by Rear Admiral Junior Grade retired Jeremy Mathis, are all precisely relevant in this context.
Do you need to address any other aspect on this page? Perhaps you can.
It's at the end of this page, page 12. I'd like to continue. In our inquiry, Tony Georgiadis is accused under German legislation for being an accessory to bribery committed by Hunings and other executives of the GFC. He is also suspected of being an accessory to embezzlement committed by Koopman. It says in brackets, kickback payments. More details see beyond. If I may say, my own analysis of the documents, it wasn't only in respect of embezzlement by Koopman. This is, in fact, not only a kickback payment, but actually what they call a reverse kickback, where money gets paid by a bribing party, by a company official, and then money from the bribed party gets paid back, and that's what I call a reverse kickback. And Koopman was indeed arrested for that, in fact spent 4 weeks in jail for it. But as far as I can see from these documents, Hunnings himself is alleged to have received a $500,000 reverse kickback out of the $3 million in respect of the payment to Chippy Sheikh and the group represented by him.
Anything of interest on the next page?
Everything is of interest, but without belaboring the proceedings, I can skip to my page 14 unless anybody wants me to address any previous issues.
Now, your page 14 is our 1089. It has under paragraph 7, Tony Ngeni. Is that the one?
That's correct, yes. Okay, as I've alluded to, there were parties involved in stopping the first round. I call round 1, other people call it phase 1 of the Citron, the Corvette project, ostensibly, officially, in order to review it under the defence review and then carry on later in round 2, which eventually led to a contract. But this is the point I'm getting to. As they say, starting at point 7 under Tony Ngeni, says during the June 2006 search of TRT, an agreement between Ngeni and Hunnings dated the 11th of August 1995 has been seized. According to that document, Ngeni was promised a commission of 2.5 million Deutschmarks. In fact, I could prove the agreement had been signed 1 month later on the 11th of October 1995 during a South Africa journey of Hunnings, KJ Muller and Koopman. I'll skip 3 lines for the sake of brevity. Carry on. On his return to Germany, Hunnings arranged a provision for the promised commission of 2.5 million Deutschmarks. The provision has been entered into the accounts of TRT on the 28th of September 1995. They do carry on, in case I get that particular agreement seemed to have been discontinued. They call it disbanded, but they do carry on. As they say, it is unlikely that TRT did not pay Ngeni the promised commission at all. But be that as it may, it doesn't really matter in terms of, or certainly in my view, my layperson's view of corruption in the Republic of South Africa, whether or not an executive statement gets actually fulfilled. Any offer or any request for a bribe, whether consummated or not, is still corruption under the relevant legislation. And if it is what it says on the face of it in this document, that an agreement, a bribery agreement, was entered into, that's good enough for my purposes at least. They carry on to advise why they haven't actually gone all out to prosecute. Well, certainly they couldn't prosecute Ngeni, being a South African citizen, but they could have prosecuted the people who bribed him. And at the paragraph starting with, although we have clear evidence, I'll stop there to ensure that everybody's at the right place.
That is the second last paragraph on page 1089, is that correct?
It's at the second paragraph above what my PDF page is 14. It says 14/40 at the bottom.
That's that same passage.
Okay, thank you. I will read, quote, although we have clear evidence of corruption in connection with Ngeni, we cannot prosecute this fact. Although Malawi Incorporated contract due to the last prolongation, I think they mean extension, in 1999 and April 99, the payments to Malawi Incorporated do not qualify for a statutory limitation. We still need an action by Ngeni after the 19th of February 1999. But by the time Ngeni seems not by that time, Yengeni seems not to have been any longer in the position to influence the South African decision on the Corvette contract. Nonetheless, the facts of the Yengeni case show that employees of TRT, contrary to their defenders' statements, did have direct contact to and themselves arrange bribery agreements with South African officials. Before the change of legislation, TRT would have been able to deduct the bribe for Yengeni from their company tax obligations. Now, if I may pause there just to add my own value, I've referred to the OECD convention, which came into play in Europe and Germany around about the 1999-2000 era, and that is to what they refer the legislation that changed, and also what they talk about statutory limitation. So do not qualify. I think that their English is not that great there. What they mean is that there is a statute of limitations in Germany that mean that they may no longer prosecute in respect of this Yengeni matter after a certain time, which was February 99, and that is a reason why they no longer endeavoured with this particular case. All right, we come to the next page, my page 15 here.
That's our page 1090.
Yes, maybe I just have to start with one word from the previous pages, only this, but it carries on. This explains why they did not disguise the provision and why the agreement was made directly with Yengeni without camouflage. That is what I was saying, why before the OEC convention was promulgated in Germany, under German law, useful expenditures, bribes to foreign officials and foreign companies was tax deductible, and that is why their own documentation, which they seized, refers to these payments. Carrying on with one of the most important statements, I've highlighted in a slightly different color, and it says here, and the import in my particular, the context of my evidence, is that Yengeni himself claimed in front of Hunings that he had been responsible for the cancellation of the first tender in 1995. I will address that in more detail when I came to the relevant theme in my own evidence, in my own witness statement. As I've said as a continuation here, as chairman of the Joint Standing Committee of Defence and chief whip of the ANC, he could perform strong influence on decisions relevant for GFC. We'll certainly address that. But certainly he was in a very good position to influence the, let's say, the putting on ice of the Corvette contract and the embarking of a defence review, which was what I remember was a parliamentary endeavour way back in 1995, and certainly whether it's on the record of the committee meetings, I don't know, I haven't gone that far back. He certainly would have been very influential at that time. I suppose carrying on here, I'm looking at the last sentence of the next paragraph. Hunings obviously gained information in September 95 that Yengeni had been named as a possible successor of Modise in the cause of an expected cabinet reshuffle, which, as we know, did happen at some time. This fact makes clear why 10 days later the agreement was signed. Possibly I need to pause for just an instant, as they're referring to various things here about what Hunings said, and my impression is that they actually these investigators interviewed Hunings, and some of the things they say here is not only from the documents, but also from their interview with him. That's my own impression.
then they refer to things that were seized during the search. That you'll see in the next paragraph.
Yes, that certainly is true. I haven't highlighted something because it involves travel costs for Yengeni for a flight from South Africa, Switzerland, London. They certainly might be important, Switzerland, London specifically, because as far as I know, that's where money ended up. But I haven't highlighted that because I didn't intend to specifically address it today.
Could you take us to the...
I'm not going to go into all the details. I consider it as within the content of this document. But the next point they come to is on my page 17, which is headed by a heading 8, Vice Admiral Simpson Anderson.
Yeah, that's our page 1092.
Correct, yes?
Yes, you can continue with the aspects of that page that you want to deal with.
Okay. Just remember, I'm just reading from the document in front of me, in front of all of us. These are not my allegations. They are what I believe to be relevant allegations for a commission of inquiry. It talks about Vice Admiral Simpson Anderson. Specifically says, I found evidence that Jujardis arranged a meeting between Hunings, Van Nish, and Vice Admiral Simpson Anderson in his hotel suite at the Sandton Sun Hotel in Johannesburg on the 24th of January 1996. There are unproven indications that the purpose of the meeting was to establish a bribery agreement with Simpson Anderson, then SINK, that means Commander-in-Chief, I think they mean, Commander-in-Chief of the South African Navy. Despite them saying unproven indications, I wouldn't, if it ended at that, I might not be addressing that point at all. But they certainly go on in not only this document, but I think the next one as well, where they probably, what they mean is that, well, they certainly do mean that although Simpson Anderson might not have received the payment directly from either Thyssen or even from Georgiadis, but they allege that it was received from his predecessor, Vice Admiral Dries Pitter, who was working for both the French and the Germans at that stage. So it's not an irrelevant point despite what is said in that particular sentence. The next point I want to mention is it carries on saying, Hunings, to whom Simpson Anderson made this remark, later supposed in his internal report that this remark was made as self-protection because other Navy officials had been present, e.g. Karmerman, in brackets still captain of the SAN at that time, but already involved in the procurement process. Carry on. As proof of the self-protection theory, Hunings mentioned that Simpson Anderson had formerly asked Georgiadis to his home. In fact, we have indications that Georgiadis and Simpson Anderson had lunch together the day when Georgiadis arranged the January 1996 meeting. Simpson Anderson was quoted in Hunings' handwritten notes as, he, Georgiadis, does more harm than good. Carrying on with the theme, just to put into context, I need to read the first sentence. In connection with the meeting between Simpson Anderson, Hunings, and Van Nish in January 1996, Simpson Anderson's predecessor as SINK, Chief of the Navy, Chief of the Commander-in-Chief, of South African Navy, retired Admiral Pitter, becomes an interesting figure. In October 2000, he sent a written complaint to Blom & Voss stating that a promised commission of $1 million, that of $1 million US dollars, he only received from Georgiades 100,000 pounds, approximately 600,000 pounds less than promised. Pitter wrote under the letterhead of the Contact Management Consultants Pty Limited of Littleton Manor, South Africa. This company I could not yet trace at Cipro.
Turning to the next page, is there anything that arises there?
Yes, I think it's important just to read that. The second sentence says, Pitter now wanted Blom and Voss to compensate him, and in their quotation marks, put us in the financial position we expected to be at the end of this very successful project. I think, if I may say, at this point, the very successful project is effectively getting the Germans back from 0 in phase 1 to hero in phase 2. Carrying on, unless I get interrupted, it carries on the next sentence, but 1. This would mean that Simpson Anderson had been part of the commission agreement arranged during this meeting. And I'll miss a sentence. One possible explanation, I'm quoting again, could be that eventually Simpson Anderson had been paid directly by Georgiades, or rather Malar Incorporated, and that Pitter only received a small compensation for his service. Also carrying on, missing a sentence or two, it says, sorry, I missed the mark. Okay, carrying on with the sentence which starts with Pitter for me. Pitter for me seemed not to have been in a position would justify a commission as high as $1 million, $1 million US dollars.
The view expressed there is that of the investigator, is that right?
Yes. I think if I may just end off this particular sub-theme with the very last sentence, which is on the next page, my page 19. I think in their conclusion, although all these circumstantial evidences suggest themselves that Simpson Anderson had been bribed and promised $1 million US dollars commission, it might be difficult to find sufficient evidence to prove the bribe. My hope is that we will still find evidence either at Georgiades or Elandis or Malar Incorporated. That was an important thing for the context, but as important, we'll read either in this document or the next, these investigators also expressed their hope that the South African investigation, of which I hope this is at least part, would also carry on investigating these particular themes or allegations, and that is also one of the reasons why I'm ventilating this issue in these proceedings.
Your page 19, which is our 1094, starts, or at least has a paragraph 9, dealing with the use of Surti, Nelson Mandela, in brackets checks. Is there something you need to ventilate there?
Yes, without going into too much detail, Yusuf Surti, who I think name is spelt incorrectly there, I think it has one S. His name certainly comes up later when I ventilate the issue of him being the interlocutor between Thompson and the higher officials in the South African government, acting in respect of the Corvette Combat Suite. But he is a ubiquitous person all over here. He's coming up in the context of the Corvette platform. And I will say he also is a person of interest in the serious fraud office investigations as well. But here is a reference to Nelson Mandela, in particular, as I've said, involving I think it comes to the point involving the children's funds, and yes, in particular, the checks that were made out by Thyssen. I'm skipping quite a lot here to go to the middle of my page 20. Maybe I need to give people a chance to get to that particular page. There's a section there that says the checks were issued for the benefit of, and it starts off with Nelson Mandela Children's Fund.
That would be the last quarter of our page 1095, that's correct?
That is indeed correct. Just to introduce the subject for my own purposes, the sentence starts off by saying a copy of these checks was found at Huning's private home in Düsseldorf. The checks were issued for the benefit of Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, the Foundations for Community Development, and African National Congress. They're referring in particular to 3 checks of 500,000 South African rands each, made out on the 29th of January 1999. As far as I know, these checks came from Thyssen, but I stand to be corrected on that.
Reference to the amounts of these 3 checks is found just above the paragraph above what you've just been reading. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now, on this theme, is there anything else you would like to add, or would you like to move on to the next?
Just finishing off their conclusion under CERTI is on my page 22, just before the heading entitled 10 George Linares.
That is our page 1097, I think.
It says, because of the entire circumstances, I rather think that CERTI at least partly acted on behalf of Mandela, Mbeki, or the ANC in general. And I think that that is a fair statement to make, considering what they've addressed in their investigation documents.
Is there anything that turns on George Linares that you would like to address?
No, not that I'd like to address. I think it's relevant, but not important enough to take up more of the Commission's time right now.
The next important name you'd like to address?
Yes, then I'd like to come to my page 23, a heading number 11, Marianne Limited and Chippy Shake.
That would appear in our page 1098, I believe.
That's indeed correct. Now, as I said, when I started addressing this particular investigation report, the notice, the memorandum, or my own wording, the Teutonic Memorandum, talks about the agreement with Chippy Shake, and here they address it, and there's clearly a document that they seized in their own investigations in Germany. But what is relevant and important, it's not a self-standing document. It is supported by many other documents in their own possession. And I think it is a fair conclusion for me to make, is in terms of where I got these documents, or where I got, is that, or at least got the memorandum. If I got that one from the Germans, or from German investigating authorities, I can't understand why they cherry-picked that one alone, and not at least the Tony Yengeni one and all the other ones. So I can, beyond a reasonable doubt, say that it didn't come from the Germans, but they certainly allude, or don't allude, they report in having all of these relevant documents. What they say here in the heading entitled Marianne Limited and Chippy Shake is that on the 9th of October 1998, a consultancy agreement dated the 8th of October 1998 between TRT with the signatory of Hunings and Marianne Limited with the signatory of Ian Pierce was signed over a commission of $3 million US dollars due for payment the moment when the Corvette contract would come into force, and a down payment, their quotation starting, has been received in our account for a free and unrestricted disposal. Close their quotation, and after all necessary approvals of the South African and German authorities had been received. The effective date of the Corvette contract was the 28th of April 2000. The payment to Merian Limited was made on the 3rd of May 2000 to Barclays PLC, as I correctly said, St. Helier, Jersey. These dates are particularly important because although the umbrella agreement was signed on the 3rd of December 1999, all the contracts, the relevant contracts became effective in all respects in April 2000, and so, as they say, the effective date of contract opened the gates for the financial considerations, including these, if I may term them, illicit ones. What's also important is that the document which the notice or the memorandum is not the bribery agreement itself. It is just a reference to it. That is not in my possession, and is clearly something held by them. But in the terms of evidence, it's an important pointer to it. And of course, here they actually say that they have it, and of course they even have the date. And I don't think they'd be saying that if they didn't know that it existed and had it themselves. As well, going on to the next point, as I said, for Malar, it's a special purpose vehicle registered in Liberia, where it can't do other business. But the same with Merian. They're saying the only indication for the existence of Merian Limited is the agreement, bank account named on the payment instruction. And I think I'm correct in saying that indeed there seemed to have been another company, Merian, but it was completely separate company. My own company searches show that. But they opened, what's important is that Merian Limited, although has registered its domicilium address in London, it opened its bank account in Jersey, and that's where the money was paid to. I think, supporting that point in fact, I did my own investigation to Meriam, but it says in the registers of Companies House, now I think they're talking about the UK here, the author of this report says, I haven't found a company which would fit.
Turning to the next page and continuing with that discussion, is there anything else you would need to bring to our attention?
I think the document stands as it is written.
Just if you turn to the next page, I think it's your page 24, at the last sentence of that page makes reference to you. Could you just elaborate on that, please?
Yes, I don't want to skip that point, but I'll first of all just finish the point that basically maybe a summary of the Merian issue. It says in the last sentence of that section, before my name is mentioned, it says, in connection with the Merian Limited contract, Hunnings called Pierce in another internal report, Chippy Sheikh's emissar. He says, they say, I can't find an English translation for that word, but it means an envoy with a certain commission and no own decision-making powers. Thus, it would be clear that Ian Pierce acted as a front man for Chippy Sheikh. I think that's good enough for these purposes. If I had to find an appropriate English word for emissar, I would call it interlocutor. And in fact, that same word is used for Yusuf Surti interlocutor in that context. I don't want to skip the reference to my own name here, but it says from Richard Young we received information about one payment from Merian Limited to Pierce in the amount of $10,000 value date of 30th of March 2001. The money seems to have been transferred from the UK Reserve Bank via First National Bank of South Africa Limited. Richard Young claims that more payments had been made from Merian Limited to Pierce, but the above mentioned is the only one he could prove by presenting a transaction report. Young also presented statements for one bank account of Chippy Sheikh, but no suspicious deposit could be found. If I may say, this is true, but this is, as I said, almost in the very beginning of my evidence on, was it Thursday or even Wednesday, that I'm really a conduit in this context. I'm certainly not a primary investigator. Documents were ventilated in some manner or form, and I got hold of copies thereof and just sent them along to the Germans in my one-way street. In fact, to be ultra frank, I don't want to take too many kudos for this, but I think that this whole thing was actually reported in the Mail and Guardian. I know what's reported in the press cannot be considered necessarily as meeting the burden of proof, but I certainly did pass along this information to Detective Inspector Chief Inspector Andreas Bruns by email. I think it's important to say that this is the first investigation report. I'm still going to come to the third one, and there they do actually refer to a lot of payments made from the Merian's accounts, and there is a kind of follow the money investigation of the money being paid through Jersey, through other mechanisms, and finally into a whole bunch. I think it's about 20 different accounts in South Africa that is addressed in the third of this series of 3 reports.
There is a further discussion relating to Ian Pierce, Chippy Sheikh, and Honings in this part of the document. Is there any specific reference you want to direct the Commission's attention to?
Okay, I'm going to start off with the section there that says Ian Pierce obviously later in 2000 told Chippy Sheikh that Honings had received a share of $500,000 from Merian Limited payment. As I've said, I think that is, if it was true, would be a reverse kickback, and also unrelated to the Jürgen Koopman reverse kickback. But I just wanted to emphasize the point that I made earlier, not that long ago. Carrying on, Honings learned that from C. Sheikh during a meeting of the 21st of September 2000 in Hamburg. In consequence, Honings wrote a memorandum about this fact. This memorandum we found at his private home during the June 2006 search. From this report and other documents seized from TRT, the following sequence of events can be reconstructed. During a visit in Johannesburg from the 27th to the 30th of July 1996, Chippy Sheikh demanded from Honings the confirmation of a verbal agreement about a commission of the $3 million that they had arranged some time before. And that, I think, precisely is the memorandum dated the 3rd of August 98, referring to South Africa, over the precise date period of 27th to 30th of July 1998. I'm sorry to belaboring the point, but I've learnt in my small dealings with the law that you cover evidence with evidence with evidence if you possibly can.
Going forward?
Did you say going forward? Certainly to finish off this page, it says here, Hunings informed KJ Muller about this agreement and asked him to make sure that this amount was observed during the contract price negotiations, in brackets, i.e. to make sure that this expenditure would be refunded by the South African government through the contract price payments, which their observation is, which realizes a criminal offence of fraud in German legislation. Indeed, but the reason why they wanted it to be recorded and to be refundable from the South African government is important from the respect of bribery in South Africa. It affects the South African taxpayer, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting right here. This is a public interest thing, and I think this is a public interest point. But not only being a criminal offence of fraud in Germany, which surely might have overtaken by the statute of limitations in Germany, but it's certainly, in my own knowledge, it's not overtaken by any relevant statute of limitations in South Africa. So it is still a live issue, which hopefully are seemingly resurrecting from the dead, or almost dead. If I may also say, of course, the reason why the stuff is ventilated so clearly is the Germans not only wanted to recoup the money from South Africa, they also wanted to recoup the money from their own tax authority. In the context of this investigation, my evidence involving the German frigate consortium and my overall theme, which another person I mentioned, my evidence, Pierre Monod, calls my complex theory, which unfortunately I'm giving you today. But here they say in Blumenfoss and TRT agreed to share the cost for Sheikh's commission, which means that the refunding from South Africa would also have to be shared. That is certainly part of my complex theory.
Mention is made in the next page, I think it's here, page 26, our page 1101, to further dealings with Hunings, Georgiades, and Serti.
Sorry, I'm trying to gather my own wits about me and drink water at the same time. The page that I wanted to go to next was my page 26.
That's the page I'm referring to.
Okay, I want to start at the second sentence there because it introduces another sub-theme. It says, reading from the document, on the 9th of September 1998, Hunings met with Georgiades and Serti at the Ritz in London. The same day he also met with Mr. Mullenbeck. In brackets says Ferristal. I was wrong when I referred to a person yesterday belonging to Ferristal. He is actually a member of Thyssen. It was Mr. Mullenbeck that I was thinking of, and his name is mentioned. And Chippy Sheikh. They met in a restaurant called San Lorenzo in London. From Mullenbeck, Sheikh also required a commission for the submarine deal. Hunings says in his memorandum that he took the wording of the consultancy agreement from Mullenbeck, so that the conclusion can be made that Hunings, Mullenbeck and Sheikh met in London for the purpose and discussing and formulating the agreements with Ferristal and TRT. In fact, the wording of the Marianne Limited agreement differs from the normally used form. In the records of Ferristal, we so far couldn't find indications for a contract with or payment from Marianne Limited, so that possibly another company name had been used. It says, we are not yet investigating Ferristal and the submarine deal. Now, if I may say, as I've said before, this document, investigating report, emanates out of Düsseldorf. The way things work in Germany is in, I think they might call them prefectures, who investigate criminal affairs in their own areas or prefectures, and they didn't. They say they were not investigating Ferrostal. They said not yet. As far as I know, this particular investigating organization did not have the mandate to, and never did investigate Ferrostal, because that was actually investigated by their companions in another prefecture called of Essen, and certainly many things also come out of Munich. So I just wanted to say that point, that just because they say they couldn't find any indications of a contract, that doesn't mean to say it's the end of the story.
Anything further on this page?
Finally, I think on this page, and just to back up what I think I said yesterday, is that this bribery agreement, not the one that I produced, that was just an indicator of it. They say the signed contract then was deposited in the bank safe number A578 at Barclays Bank, address 46 Park Lane, London, W11HP. Hunnings and Pierce had the exclusive access to the safe. Hunnings had to open an account with Barclays in his own name and make a deposit into that account before he could get the safe. The money for that deposit he received from TRT.
Having come to the end of that page, there's further discussions about Hunnings, Pierce, and Sheikh in the pages following before the conclusion, except, I beg your pardon, before they start dealing with futuristic business solutions. In the remaining 2 pages discussing this theme, is there anything else you need to add?
I think for the fullness of things, we just need to address the top of my page 27. I'm going to carry on unless somebody stops me to get to the right page. It says here, in April 2000, Pierce contacted Hunnings by telephone to remind him on the agreement with Marion Limited. And then it says, Pierce handed over a closed envelope via the office of Sven Muller in South Africa to Hunnings with the instructions for the transaction. On the 3rd of May 2000, the commission of $3 million was transferred to the credit of Marion Limited. It's important because here is not just a request for a bribe, if of course this is indeed a bribe, which I would venture it is. It's not just a request, it's not only a offer, but it is the culmination, it is the fulfillment of the bribery transaction, is the payment of the funds. The consummation of the delicious union between the briber and the bribee.
Anything else on that page?
Probably important for the greater scheme of things. If anything comes out of what I've been saying before and it gets investigated, we have to find the missing 500,000 out of the 3 million. That says halfway down the page, after the transaction took place, Pierce claimed he handed over to Hunnings $500,000 in cash, which had to be deducted from the commission sum. Hunnings writes a second memorandum that Sheikh had told him that within the group of beneficiaries of the Marianne Limited agreement that there had been discussion to offer him a share of the commission as token of their gratitude. I think what's important here is there's also the reiteration of what the Teutonic memorandum says. The $3 million is in respect of Sheikh and a group represented by him. It also indicates in the following of the money that this $500,000 in cash disappears out of the 3 million. I'm going to briefly address where some of that 3 million was dispersed because it is important. But it also shows that these people were as thick as thieves when it comes to not only kickbacks, but reverse kickbacks as well. Another point, I have to start at a place where it says, it seems that Sheikh believed Hunnings and that he made new arrangements with Pierce concerning the commission money, which now he wanted to be deposited into a Swiss account because SA authorities could perhaps trace the money from Marion Limited to Pierce. It also seems that the missing $500,000 through this arrangement turned up again. Strange. At least this incident seems not to have affected the relationship between Hunnings and Chippy Sheikh. This fact no longer is prosecutable under German legislation because of the statutory limitation. A very important point I've highlighted in a different color is our intention is to encourage South Africa to open an investigation into this matter. Furthermore, this matter is interesting in the whole context of this case. If I may say so, they might have well have stolen the words out of my own mouth. Words come later than theirs.
Now, if you turn to page 28, I think that's the page that concludes the discussion on this theme before we deal with
I'm sorry, we're going to adjourn for 20 minutes for tea. We'll come back after 20 minutes.